I want to make a video to discuss a few topics that I've seen in a particular circle here on YouTube recently. And I'm going to start off with mathematics as it relates to the scientific method of formulating and validating theories, and that as its epistemological place, appropriate place, proper use. The scientific method, which created, for example, Newton's laws of motion, used a sort of empiricism that was very pragmatic and very systematic. Measurements were made. A mathematical model was made for the measurements, and it was tested. The same thing for Lenz's and Faraday's laws of electromagnetism. There are other principles in science, other theories in science, which are less systematically accessible because they rely on theory and are abstractions, necessary abstractions. Anytime you assign a variable to something, a phenomenon, you are making a sort of abstraction. Newton's laws contain abstractions. There are exceptions and qualifications to Newton's laws on the quantum level. There are effects with no causes in quantum mechanics, known causes. And therefore, Newtonian mechanics must be qualified with quantum mechanics. Now, it's one thing to produce a mathematical model that's multidimensional for a theoretical phenomenon such as photon spin entanglement or the supersymmetry that we see on the subatomic level. But those models are not the thing itself. And these sorts of symmetries are multidimensional in nature because of the fact that something is moving at a distance in sympathy with something that is locally moving. And so for every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction, according to Newton's third law. But with hypersymmetry or supersymmetry, we see that for every action, there are multiple actions. And so there's this other dimension of change, of movement, that cannot be described with a three-dimensional model. Now, most people, most Western educated people, model the universe with a spherical Earth going around a spherical sun, rotating on its axis once a day, and orbiting the sun in 1 year. That's known as the heliocentric model. It's an abstraction. Now, it can actually be shown to be physically false. That information is not commonly available. But there's something more subtle that is a sort of error in our three-dimensional model of the world. Now, outside of the fact that the surrounding waveforms are actually what is moving the Earth through time, we have the issue of supersymmetry as it manifests in unknown ways as we move through time. And so we can create this map of the world that is this ball and say, I know it's a ball because I can travel around it in a given amount of time. But what if it takes you 10 years to come back to the same place? How is that place going to be different from the place you left? And the more important question, when you're analyzing things multidimensionally, is how is what path you choose going to influence that place? And so this is what Einstein called a spooky action at a distance. There is this connection that was already accepted into the canons of science in the form of the force that Einstein took exception with. Now, I agree with Einstein that God does not play dice with the universe and that these things are not random, but they're real. And so to deal with them conceptually, it's useful to think of the world as multidimensional. And in the many worlds quantum mechanic camp, the world is thought of as branching off into multiple universes that are joined at the moment. And to describe something like this with string theory is rather unintelligible. It's not accessible to people that have studied three-dimensionally. Because to think of the world as having all these other extra dimensions that there is no tangible way of influencing just sort of makes it practically random. And so the dice factor is one way to deal with it. And some of the quantum mechanical schools, that's exactly how they deal with it. They consider it to be a randomness that the universe has on these underlying symmetric levels. But there are individuals who sorted this thing out, both contemporary and historically, and work with the universe as being multidimensional. Now, for most of the Western scientists schooled in universities and physics and similar things, some of these people might seem odd. I mean, you've got, for example, Risa5 here on YouTube, who talks about multidimensional awareness. And this concept is inaccessible to people who do not understand the principle that what they do affects the outside world in very real, tangible ways that can be approached through an acquired or sometimes natural awareness about the nature of the interactions, of the interconnections between things. Now, there are two books that I could refer you to on this. One is Believe by a man by the name of Fred Alan Wolf. And he wrote a book called The Yoga of Time Travel. And here again, the theory is that there is a way to navigate this multidimensional, what would be randomly selected space in a conscious way that sorts out this other dimension, this other symmetric exchange of energy in a way that is intelligent and intentional. Arguably much more intelligent than the way people normally approach it. There's another book, and I can't remember the name of the author, but the name of the book is The Dancing Wu Li Masters, and also approaches this same sort of truth about the nature of our reality. And again, these are abstractions. These are ways of approaching concepts, of approaching a subtler nature to nature. It doesn't mean you have to throw out your flat map. doesn't mean you have to pretend that the Earth is a particular shape. You can treat it as round. You can go around it. You can think of it that way. It's still useful to have the round map, but that's just an abstraction. The three-dimensional worldview is a three-dimensional abstraction of a more complex reality. And approaching that reality and working with the facts of that reality means admitting and understanding the nature of these underlying connections. The fact is that the Lenz and Faraday laws abstract the nature of electromagnetism. There's no mechanism given. It's considered to be this force that was treated in the canonical protocol set out by Newton when he discovered the laws of motion. This is algebraic relationships. These describe phenomenon. They don't describe what causes the phenomenon. They don't describe how the phenomenon actually works. That is the realm of theoretical physics. That is the realm of theory. And it requires imagination in order to develop and ostensibly attain these more mathematical relationships based on the applied work with the observations. And this is happening. This is happening in quantum mechanics on the subatomic level. And in astrophotometry, it's happening cosmically. The equations aren't there yet. They will be. If I don't do it, someone else will. Because the relationships exist. And that's where the science comes from.